ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 o'clock in Porto Novo. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio Broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to the third edition of Newslink. First, the headlines. Amnesty International urges Togo to investigate alleged torture of protesters and end crackdown on dissent. Security experts in Nigeria criticize low response to the worsening security situation in Benue State.
These measures have been announced not once, not twice. What it's beginning to look like is the moment we have a spike in any part of the state, we hear the same measures.
Opposition political groups in Guinea reject the creation of a new election management body by the junta.
We say it and we insist that we need an organization of elections, that is to say, a totally independent CENI. That's clear. Under no circumstances can we go to elections without taking part in the decisions made.
And civil society actors and experts gather in Dakar for African Conference on Governance and Human Security. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
My name is Hankulu Jibril Janko. Many thanks for joining us and welcome to this edition of Newslink, which begins in Togo as Amnesty International is calling on Togolese authorities to immediately investigate credible allegations of torture against protesters detained earlier this month and to end ongoing repression of a peaceful dissent. Dozens of people were arrested on 5 and 6 June in Lome during protests against the rising cost of living, shrinking civil liberties, and recent constitutional changes that could allow Faure Gnassingbé, now president of the Council of Ministers, to extend his hold on power. Augustine Colley has the rest of the details.
56 protesters were released on June 9, while at least 3 remain in detention. Testimonies collected by Amnesty International describe severe beatings, threats, and humiliation while in custody at the Dijole Gendarmerie Center. Medical reports confirm injuries consistent with torture. Marcel Sividou, Amnesty's interim regional director for Western Central Africa, said, and I quote, "These protesters have been punished simply for expressing their opinions. Banning protests and using force to silence dissent violates both Togolese and international law." End of quote. One protester recounted being beaten by multiple officers and forced to perform degrading acts, including singing into a switched-off megaphone. Others reported being forced to sign documents without understanding their contents or receiving threats for speaking out online. Amnesty International urges the government to uphold its human rights commitments, including those made during the Universal Periodic Review, and to ensure a prompt, independent investigation into all allegations of torture. Freedom of expression and peaceful assembly must be respected and not criminalized, according to Amnesty.
Augustine Colley filed that report. Meanwhile, the state of Togo has approved the candidate list for the municipal elections scheduled for July 2025. The July 17 election is comprised of 494 candidate list. Recall that a disapproval for the earlier scheduled July 10 ballot by political parties and civil society forced the government to postpone the election to allow for better preparations. Among all the concerns raised was the increased number of councillors, which has since been suspended by the Electoral Commission. Francis Boniface has the rest of the details.
The 494 candidates list were announced on Monday, following approval by the Administrative Chamber of Togo's Supreme Court last week. The Apex Court in the publication declared the list as final and valid. The lists were selected after the review of 520 applications submitted by the Independent National Electoral Commission, CENI. Of the total number of applications submitted, 26 were rejected, including 25 from opposition parties and independent groups. The rejected files were marked by several irregularities, such as the presentation of candidates with minimum requirements, those with dual citizenship, and lists whose number of candidates is above the required threshold. Upon this declaration, Seni says electoral official campaigns are set to begin on July 1 and will last for 2 weeks across Togo's 5 regions and 39 prefectures. Over the weekend, the electoral umpire conducted a random drawing for the positioning of the list on the ballot papers. Seni also said it had received some of the electoral materials, including the indelible ink. The municipal elections in Togo will take place under a tense political climate characterized by protest and denunciation by youths, opposition groups, and citizens alike of the current state of governance.
Francis Boniface filed that report. In Guinea, the Transitional Authority has commissioned a new election management body. Established by President's decree over the weekend, the General Directorate of Election is tasked with organizing the referendum and then the elections. The DGE thus replaces the National Independent Electoral Commission, (CENI). The new institution, placed under the supervision of the Ministry of Territorial Administration, has already been rejected by the opposition. Opponents see it as a body entirely under state control, designed to keep the military in power. Imo Edet completes the story.
20 years later, the organization of elections has returned to the Ministry of Territorial Administration via the General Directorate of Elections. The heads of the new DGE will be appointed by the presidency, a decision that angers the political opposition. Opponents are already questioning the independence of this body responsible for organizing elections in Guinea. The configuration of the General Directorate of Elections does not comply with the conclusions of the 2022 political dialogue, says Mohamed Sisse, spokesperson for the National Hope and Development Party.
The operational management team should organize the referendum to provide the country with a constitution. From there, constitutional institutions should be established, including an independent technical body for election management. It is this body that should, in principle, take charge of the future, along with an observatory composed of competitors to ensure the transparency of the electoral process.
Opponents united within the Forces Vive are calling on the government to review the configuration of the new General Directorate of Elections. They have also threatened to disrupt the process of organizing the referendum and elections. Rafi So is president of the PRP party.
We say it and we insist, we even persist that we need an organization of elections, that is to say, a totally independent CENI. That's clear. Under no circumstances can we go to elections without taking part in the decisions made. And we cannot allow elections to be held here without this. We will not allow ballot boxes or anything else to be held in our neighborhoods if we don't sit down and discuss it. That's clear.
The National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, a civic organization, denounces the military's desire to seize power. The former ruling party, the RPG of former President Alpha Conde, speaks of a democratic backsliding. The Guinean transitional government months ago promised to hold the much anticipated election by the end of the year, a position political observers are doubtful of amid the existing socio-political tension.
A report by WDR's Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Balde and voiced by Imo Edet.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Mali, there is a new twist in the trial involving the purchase of the presidential plane and military equipment in 2014. The defense lawyers have raised the issue of the lack of jurisdiction of the special court, which has been hearing the case for several months. Several former civilian and military figures are on trial for embezzlement of over 130 billion CFA francs. The hearing, which resumes this Tuesday after a recess last week, will allow the court to rule on the matter. Abdullah Hassan reports.
The defense lawyers are asking the court to declare itself incompetent and discontinue its judgment in the case concerning the purchase of the presidential plane and military equipment, which dates back to 2014. The argument put forward is the entry into force of the new Code of Criminal Procedure on June 13, following its adoption in December 2024. This new Code of Criminal Procedure abolishes the special court, which is now to be replaced by criminal chambers at the level of the High Court. Defense lawyers say they have filed a petition with the first president of the Supreme Court seeking a declaration that the special court lacks jurisdiction to try the former Minister of Economy, Buhari Phyllis Sissoko, and other former officials prosecuted for the alleged embezzlement of 130 billion CFA francs, funds intended for the purchase of the presidential plane and military equipment in 2014. In response to the defense, the prosecution has requested the establishment of a transitional panel to continue the trial. The hearing, which was suspended on Monday, is scheduled to resume this Tuesday. The court will rule on whether or not it lacks jurisdiction to continue to try this case. All the defendants in this case, including the last to speak last week, have pleaded not guilty.
Abdullah Hassan with that report. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu is scheduled to visit Benue State on Wednesday, June 13th, to sympathize with residents over the recent massacre. Ahead of the visit, Tinubu, in a statement by presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanungu, highlighted immediate security measures for forestall further carnage. These include intensifying stakeholder engagement, advancing border surveillance, boosting intelligence sharing among neighboring states, and increasing deployment of tactical squads. The latter was immediately accomplished upon the arrival of the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetukon, in Benue on Monday. But these measures have the potential for lasting peace? Omale Okropo, Public and Security Affairs Analyst, responds.
These measures have been announced not once, not twice. What it's beginning to look like is the moment we have a spike in any part of the state, we hear the same measures, being put forward by the president or the federal authorities. The aspect that I feel is critical for the state now is, number one, the deployment of more tactical forces in the state to checkmate the marauding bandits and suspected herdsmen. If we can have a quantum leap, so to say, in the number of tactical forces deployed to the state, I think it is going to help a lot. Well, it's a good thing the president, has asked the governor to intensify efforts in the stakeholder meetings and all that. And I think if that is done, it is going to help. If we have a decentralized police force, that is directly under the control of governors, with people recruited from the various local government areas, people who know the terrain, people who were born and bred and, live in those communities and all that, I think it will, to a great extent, check the rampant cases of attacks on our various communities.
Omale Okropo is a public and security affairs analyst. Still in Nigeria, the federal government is intensifying efforts to boost infrastructure development by tapping into private capital and expertise. In Abuja today, top government officials, international investors, and private sector leaders converged for the 2025 Nigeria Policy Private Partnership Summit. The goal to unlock the country's development potential through strategic and sustainable PPPs. Our correspondent Yachenu Seso reports.
It was a full house at the banquet hall of the State House as Nigeria hosted the opening session of the 2025 Public-Private Partnership Summit. The event, themed Unlocking Nigeria's Potential, the role of public-private partnerships in delivering the renewed hope agenda, aims to reshape how infrastructure is funded and delivered in the country. Representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Vice President Kashim Shettima declared the summit open, restating the administration's resolve to build a more investment-friendly Nigeria through sound PPP frameworks.
Our national aspirations far exceed what public budgets alone can deliver. That is why we must innovate and why we must work together.
Director General of the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, Dr. Jobson Ewalefo, said the summit is not just about deals.
It's a rallying call for transformation, a platform for strategic convergence, and a bridge between national aspiration and tangible development.
In her remarks, the regional director for the International Finance Corporation IFC, Dalia Khalifa, emphasized that public-private partnerships free up government funds.
Done right, PPPs inject new capital, upgrade infrastructure, improve service delivery, but free up public funds to invest in other priorities such as education, healthcare, and critical infrastructure.
Other speakers included the presidents of Afrexim Bank and Africa Development Bank and representatives from major infrastructure investors, all expressing optimism about Nigeria's PPP potential. The summit continues tomorrow with sessions focused on financing models, risk mitigation, and sector-specific opportunities. For WADR, Yechinu Sasitu in Abuja.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Amnesty International urges Togo to investigate alleged torture of protesters and end crackdown on dissent. Security experts in Nigeria criticize slow response to the worsening security situation in Benue State. Opposition political groups in Guinea reject creation of a new election management body by the junta. And civil society actors and experts gather in Dakar for the conference on governance and human security. Still ahead, we do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Hundreds of policy analysts, including governance experts and civil society representatives, are gathering here in Dakar, Senegal, to discuss the challenges and opportunities for democracy across the African continent. The occasion is the second African Conference on Democracy, organized by the Foundation for Innovation for Democracy, a Pan-African non-profit organization. This year's theme is Substantive Democracy, Sovereignty and Human Security. The theme encourages various governments to rethink democracy in a broader context, emphasizing the importance of ensuring dignified and sustainable living conditions, which are essential for fostering inclusive social and political justice. Faiz Ismail, a professor at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, provides insights into the democratic governance in Africa.
Democracy is in crisis in Africa, yes. It is also in crisis in Europe and the United States. So we have a global challenge to rethink, to redefine what we mean by democracy. And what we're seeing is not just a dissatisfaction with democratic institutions, but a dissatisfaction with the economic development models which are creating inequality and excluding the majority of people from participating in the economy. And this is what's causing the shift to sort of a right-wing populism. And it does mean that we need to rethink, we need to challenge ourselves to develop new ideas that speak to our own interests, our own concerns, our own context, our own history, our own culture, and our own values.
Faisal Ismail is a professor at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Meanwhile, 3 basins across the Gambia, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau and Guinea are set to get a facelift on various social economic projects. This will be achieved through the Integrated Development Master Plan by the Gambia River Basin Development Organization, OMVG. The master plan, which is heavily hinged on 3 fundamental orientations, targets 179 multi-sector projects in areas of energy, environment, agriculture and transport, as well as good governance. The project, when completed, would also improve trans-over connectivity among the 4 countries and enhance food security. Christopher Atecho was at the launch of the project here in Dakar and filed this report.
The plan, titled Integrated Development Master Plan by the Gambia River Basin Development Organization (OMVG), stretches from 2023 to 2040. A total of $7.95 billion is required for the implementation of the project across River Gambia, Kayanga-Giba, and Kolibao-Kuribao. An estimated 6.6 million people from these member countries will benefit from the project upon completion. Other projects are in the field of energy, basic services such as urban and rural water supply, governance, environment, and ecosystem. Demba Diallo is the commissioner of the OMVG.
It's a very diverse master plan, and we developed this investment component of it. But again, out of the investment component, we have 179 projects that are identified. 26 of them are the priority projects. Among these priority projects, some have already started rolling out because we've started studies for some of these projects, and we hope to mobilize the financial resources. That is the objective of this forum. And there are commitments. We hope the partners will be able to come and join us and fund this project.
Gambia's Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources, Rohi John Manjan, expressed strong political will to attract investor interests.
This is a political directive, so we hope and look forward to strengthening our partners between the OMVG and the development partners to make sure that the master plan and other OMVG activities are implemented for a sustainable development targets.
Laura Munoz Perez, the regional team lead for the UN Capital Development Fund in West and Central Africa and the Caribbean, expressed the fund's commitment to supporting the project.
With the support of UNCDF, ONVG has developed its own master plan, investment master plan. Now we are supporting them in this process, in this journey to mobilize funding.
The Gambia River Development Organization (OMVG) is a sub-regional cooperation and integration organization that brings together Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea and Senegal for trans-border development.
Christopher Atichu filed that report. Elsewhere, the ECOWAS Parliament has kicked off a week-long dialogue aimed at evaluating the region's investment strategies to tackle the high unemployment rates. The discussions, which began on Monday in Monrovia, form part of activities of the 6th Legislature's Joint Committee on Administration, Finance, Macroeconomic Policy, Research and Public Accounts within the regional framework. Officials and representatives from various West African countries are attending the event, determined to analyze the core drivers of unemployment in the sub-region. Actionable solutions that can support employment opportunities and address socio-economic challenges linked to unemployment are expected at the end of the gathering. From Monrovia, WDI's Abraham Parker reports.
During the opening remarks, Senator Edwin Snow, the head of Liberia's dedication, emphasized that youth unemployment in the region is more than just an economic issue. In his words, it threatens social cohesion, peace, and migration patterns. Also speaking, Alaji Dapo, chairman of the Joint Committee on Administration, Finance, Macroeconomic Policy, Research and Public of the ECOWAS Parliament, pledged the committee's willingness.
We are here to listen, to learn, and to lead the charge for reforms that ensure that investment is more impactful in the lives of our community citizens, to deliberate proper recommendations that will help attract quality investments, drive innovations, and ensure job creation in our region.
For her part, the president pro tempore of the Liberian Senate, Nyombli Kanga Lawrence, expressed concern over the alarming rise of youth unemployment across the region, warning that West Africa's youth toll is nearing some of the highest levels globally.
Economic growth and peace are intertwined. By addressing unemployment, we are not only investing in our economies, but we are also investing in peace, in dignity, and the future of our young people.
The conference honored the theme assessing the effectiveness of the ECOWAS investment policy intended to address rising levels of unemployment in the sub-region, aims to identify gaps within existing investment opportunities in West Africa. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In our guest interview this evening, we head back to Nigeria, where security experts are criticizing the slow response to the worsening security situation in Benue State. Their concerns follow a series of deadly attacks on farming communities by armed herders, violence that has displaced thousands and threatened food production in the region. Analysts warn that without swift and coordinated intervention, the crisis could escalate further, undermining both local stability and national food security. Our guest today is Omale Okropo, Public and Security Affairs Analyst.
Of course, we know that these conflicts stem from the struggle for grazing fields, struggle for water points, struggle for protection of land or right to land and all of that. So this has been the major point of difference between the farmers and the herders. In Benue, for example, we had been having a relative peace between farmers and herders pre-2017. So from 2017 backwards, down to 2016, 15, 14, thereabout, down the line, there had been relative peace. But it wasn't completely rancor-free. Of course, there are moments where issues of violence occur, but not with so much of intensity and not so much of a continuous measure as it is now. So post-2017, it now became a more intensified and more consistent wave of attacks.
What are some of the reasons beyond the fact that there is a competition for natural resources, water points, and grazing lands, like you said?
Yeah, so for in Benue, I know that one of the turning points, one of the major reasons that brought about the new wave of conflict was the signing into law of the open grazing prohibition law. If you recall, the law was passed in June 2016, and so by October of that year, the law came into force, where the governor said, the then governor, Mr. Samuel Otom, set up a livestock protection guard. So the job of the livestock protection guard then was to go around the state, keep a surveillance to ensure that the law was observed strictly.
So violators will be sanctioned.
And violators to be sanctioned. And of course, that's what they were doing. So between October and December, there was relative peace of 2016. Then, January 1st, 2017, there was massive attack. From then up to today, up to that, even now as we speak, there has been waves and waves and waves and waves of attacks. In fact, since the beginning of this 2025, there has been an unprecedented wave of attacks.
There have been arguments from different sections or quarters of the population that the current wave of attacks or insecurity in the North Central region, precisely Benue State, has a more political undertone to it.
One cannot completely rule out cases of maybe political undertones. But then again, you can't also rely so much on that because there is no evidence to back that up. Or if you say, oh, it's political undertones, so someone will say, okay, so who are the political gladiators that are, or who are the political figures that are fueling the crisis? And then you start scratching your head. But then, for us in the civil society, we are not so much bothered about who is fueling what. We are more bothered about how are the security agencies living up to this challenge.
Are they living up to the challenges?
If you ask me, I would say not so very much. Not so very much in the sense that since 2017 up to date, when this crisis has become very, very violent and consistent, I have not seen where anybody has been arrested. Where they will say, oh, we arrested 10 bandits yesterday that attacked XY village. Oh, we arrested 5 people that attacked this village. Personally, I have not understand to be corrected. So they attack, they kill, they destroy, they go scot-free. Nobody's arrested, nobody's prosecuted, and that's it.
Omale Okropo, Public Analyst Security Affairs, was our guest this evening. And in sports, having failed to qualify for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations, Guinea refused to admit defeat. The Guinea Football Federation (FGF) announced on Monday, June 16, that it had taken its dispute to Court of Arbitration for Sports CAS in Lausanne after its appeal was rejected by the Confederation of African Football (CAF). And that's it for sports. Well, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sak and Sehnjai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X and Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live at WADR.org. I am Sankule Janko. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3